I had to barricade myself in that place because of the storm. Out there, in the middle of the mountains, in the absolute middle of nowhere, it felt like the only way to protect myself. I heard laughter in the distance, outside. And they say that up there, in those mountains, there are witches. But in that moment, I somehow understood it. I understood why they were laughing. I understood where I had wandered into. For a second, I had the realization what was in there with me was worse than anything waiting outside. My story begins with a warning. Listen to your grandmothers, if you're fortunate enough to still have them with you. There is no one in this world who worries about you more. My grandmother's house is in the town where my mother was born, where her whole family was from. My mom moved to the city for work, but everyone else stayed behind. I never met them until my parents divorced. My father, for some reason, didn't want me involved with that side of the family, to even know that part of my life. They welcomed me with a birthday party, and from then on, even though they were far away, they were the family that was always there. Unfortunately, my mom's family has the worst luck of dying far too young. That big family in the town kept getting smaller. Over the years, the only person I went to visit was my grandmother, Rose, especially after she started getting sick. My mom and I took turns so that every weekend, at least one of us would go stay with Grandma Rose. And this, folks, happened on a Friday. Not just any Friday. I know it sounds like a cliche, but this started on Friday the 13th. Friday, December 13th, 2013. I arrived and got off the bus that passed through the town. The place is so small that no one else got off. Then I started the walk to my grandmother's house. It was impossible not to notice it every time I went, to pay attention, to see the stores where I'd run excitedly for candy as a kid, which were fewer and fewer each time. A general store that somehow survived there with the town's few remaining people had outlasted them all. My grandmother's house was almost at the edge of town, walking up a street from where you could see everything, every light, every street lamp, every window in the place, a view I still remember and cherish. I found my grandmother outside, worried, looking toward the woods, toward the trees about 100 yards from her house, where the mountain began. At first I thought she was watering the plants, but I immediately realized it was something else. She looked deeply troubled. I asked her what was wrong, and as soon as she saw me, she hugged me. She told me my Uncle Leo had visited and had left her very worried. He'd been there chatting with her for a bit, had taken a walk to see how she was, but then his sanity slipped away again. He started talking to himself, saying things that made no sense, as if he were speaking to someone else, as if he were answering someone who wasn't there. And then, just like he used to do, he took off running toward the woods. See, my Uncle Leo, my grandmother's nephew, my mom's youngest cousin, used to go through phases like this. He'd disappear for weeks, lose his mind, get lost. Sometimes he'd go up into the mountains. Sometimes he'd show up in another town. They say one time another uncle found him way out near the border and brought him all the way back. My mom says it's because he got into hard drugs when he was a teenager. My grandmother believed it was because his mother had a debt, one of those debts to something else, and they collected it with her boy's sanity. Grandma Rose believed strongly in witches, but not in the way most of us imagine them. Real witches. Out there, it was common in the old days. Those women who did work for you, who helped with health, love, fortune. There was a solution for everything, an answer for every ill. But there was also a debt. Sometimes they didn't collect right away, but it was never, ever left unpaid. Grandma Rose wanted nothing to do with them. It was more a thing of the past, because from the time I started visiting, I never saw anything, even though they said the witches had hidden away in the mountains after crossing the wrong county sheriff. Nothing. I never saw a thing. And well, my grandmother always believed that Uncle Leo's temporary madness was their doing, a witch thing. We went inside. She was going to give me some dinner because I'd arrived tired. But I saw my Grandma Rose was so worried, the tension never left her eyes, and I saw her keep glancing toward the window that faced the hills. I hurried through dinner and told her I'd take a walk to look for Uncle Leo, that maybe he was still close by, wandering dazed among the trees. She told me not to go, pointing at the clouds in the distance. A storm wasn't far off. I replied that was exactly why it was important to find my uncle soon. What if he got stuck up there and something happened to him? I was worried about him, of course, but mostly about Grandma Rose, because she couldn't handle the stress anymore. If I could look for him, I would. Besides, I'd spent so much time with my cousins in those woods that I knew the area well. I wasn't going to go anywhere I couldn't find my way back from. I finally convinced my grandmother. She told me Uncle Leo was wearing a green sweater, one she'd knitted for him herself, and to please not stay in the woods after midnight. I told her not to worry. It was barely 8 p.m. At that moment, I didn't believe it would take me more than an hour to find Uncle Leo. Before I left, she told me one more thing, a warning that for some reason felt much more serious. Right before she gave me her blessing, no matter what happens, son, even if the storm catches you, do not take shelter in the old Berlang house. It's abandoned, but it's not empty. I knew the story. The Berlang brothers were two older gentlemen, twins, who had always lived alone in a small house up on the ridge, on a flat little patch of land they used to grow all sorts of things. That's how they lived, and their house was right in the middle of that field. I remember seeing it once as a kid, but I have no idea how I got there. I didn't expect to see it that night. I ventured onto the trail I knew, the one that made me feel safe, and even though the wind was starting to howl, I kept calling out for Uncle Leo. They say sometimes the wind carries your voice, makes your shouts travel even farther. So I trusted the wind to carry my voice and help me find my uncle. As soon as I got in among the trees, the sound of the town faded away. I knew that strange silence of the woods. Every once in a while, you could hear dogs barking far away, but that was it, as if only they had permission to make a sound. I'd been climbing for maybe half an hour when I heard voices talking calmly. I approached where they were and saw two figures sitting by a dead campfire. It was dark now, and I didn't want to blind them with my phone's flashlight, so I spoke to the pair of silhouettes. "Evening. Have you seen anyone pass through here?" I asked it that way so they'd know I was local, that everyone knows everyone around here, because I still had my doubts that they might be troublemakers hiding out. In the dark, they looked like a pair of black coats, and I could only see the whites of their eyes. They turned to look at me. "Leo? Nothing comes through here this time of night," one said. "Nothing passes through these hours," the other said immediately. "He's my uncle. He's not well. He gets confused and gets lost. We're afraid something might happen to him up here. He's Rose's nephew. She's my grandmother." I said it, figuring they probably knew Grandma Rose. "Yeah, we know Rose." "Yes, we know Rose," said one, and the other chimed in right after, their answers overlapping. And that struck me as odd. The town is tiny, minuscule, and maybe it was because they were some of the older folks, but I knew that everyone there knew who my grandmother was. That's why I said her name, because I was starting to feel distrustful, so they'd know who I was. But nobody's come through here. Or we didn't see him pass. Didn't see him pass. We didn't. But keep heading up. Find him soon, because the storm's coming. Because around here, one shouldn't be out on nights like this. Shouldn't be out on nights like this. No, shouldn't be out. I thanked them, trying to be as polite as possible, as if that would stop them from doing anything to me if they were bad people. One of them, the one who spoke first, stood up. He came a little closer to me. It was so dark there among the trees that even a meter away I couldn't make out his form. I couldn't see any details. I couldn't see what he was wearing or what his face looked like. He was a black smudge near me, from which I only saw eyes. "You know he didn't come up here alone, boy," he asked me in a very low voice, just for me to hear. "I know you're worried. You gotta find your kin. But tonight's not a good night for climbing further." He spoke, and the silhouette turned and sat back down with the other by the dead campfire. As if I weren't there, they went back to their conversation, and I said goodbye. I told them I'd maybe see them on the way back, and after walking a few steps, I stopped hearing them. I was really worried. I'd made a promise to Grandma Rose. I was terrified to go on, but I was even more terrified to go back. To have to tell her I found nothing, that I didn't dare go further up because it was too dark. What person in their right mind would dare say such a thing? I don't know how much farther I climbed, but to the right of the trail I was on, I saw a short path leading to a field. There, without the shadow of the trees, my flashlight could reach a little farther. I saw an overgrown field full of weeds. In the middle of it, a small adobe house, barely standing, the Berlang house. And there, in the trees above me, I could see the storm approaching, and I thought about what Grandma Rose had said in her warning, but the little house didn't look like a place I'd even want to get close to. I kept climbing, kept walking a while longer. At times I turned off the flashlight because the last thing I wanted was for the battery to die. I couldn't be left in the dark up there, so I had to start saving power. I'd turned the light off for long periods while I kept shouting. My eyes got used to the darkness, and suddenly, I'm not lying, I felt like I could see even better with it off. So I kept walking, climbing up the trail that no longer seemed so familiar, that I no longer recognized. I started losing confidence, turning the light on, walking a bit, seeing the ground in front of me, shining it around to see if I could spot Uncle Leo curled up somewhere, turning it off, looking around in the pure darkness. Suddenly, when I had it off, I saw something ahead, in the darkness, but perfectly clear. A woman standing in the middle of the trail I was heading down. The wind was picking up, the drizzle turning to rain. The woman was holding her shawl with one hand near her throat, clutching it. It didn't let me see her face, though even at that distance, without the darkness, it would have been impossible anyway. I tried. I wanted to say, "Good evening," but I couldn't. You know that feeling of immediate danger? The kind that isn't obvious, that hides in normality, but something tells you not to trust someone. That danger you feel between your stomach and your chest that simply tells you to get away from there. I felt something like that. Something that wouldn't let me speak to her. And I started remembering Grandma Rose's fears, the stories I'd heard about the witches who had hidden in the mountains. The only thing I was sure of was that this short figure was not my Uncle Leo. So, without saying a word, I turned around and started back down. I looked back to see if she was still visible, but I could make out the silhouette, closer now. She was running. I shut off my light and started running downhill in complete darkness. I couldn't see the ground. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But I kept running, letting my knees fall forward, propelled by the slope that got steeper and steeper. The woman behind me was following close, running at the same speed. I knew if I was going to escape, I had to risk it, run as fast as I could. I thought I could make it to the dead campfire, to those people who had warned me, but at the same time I felt I wouldn't make it. I had to think fast. Suddenly I felt something on my jaw, in my mouth, my nose, a burning, stinging pain deep inside my head. I felt mud forcing its way into my mouth, my eyes. I'd fallen face first. I don't know how much farther I tumbled, but the first thing I did was get up, only to hear something rushing through the undergrowth, something I could have sworn sounded like laughter. "That's what you wanted? To scare me so I'd break my face, right?" I yelled into the darkness, angry, in a way hoping it was just that, wishing, begging God that they just wanted to scare me, hoping they'd let me go and let me keep descending. The storm had arrived in full force now. I tried to pull myself together, to keep going down as best I could, but water was starting to run down the trail. I looked back into the darkness. I didn't see her, but I felt that something was still following me, now among the trees. The trail had almost disappeared. It seemed impossible to follow. And then, to the left, there was the field, and in the middle of it, the little house. My grandmother's warning, Grandma Rose's words, were still very present, but so was the instinct for survival, telling me I had to take cover, find a place where I could wait out the storm. That lightning strike hadn't landed far from me. The house was the only shelter nearby from the storm and from whatever was following me. I pushed into the field and crossed it as fast as the overgrown weeds would allow, through what had once been a field where everything grew. In the middle of the overgrowth, a few meters before reaching the house, I looked back toward the trees, toward that absolute darkness. I don't know if it was the storm hitting my eyes, making me close them at times, but I thought I saw, in the lightning flash, something in the treetops where I'd come from. I thought I saw figures, women in black up there, on the thinnest branches that shouldn't have supported them. I could make out at least 3. I ran to the little house and knocked. It smelled of pure earth, of abandonment. I opened the door. It was obvious no one was there, so I went in. There were a couple of leaks, but it was mostly dry. I could hold out there while the storm passed. I remembered the story of that place because, remember, I told you it wasn't just about what I lived through, but also the stories I'd heard. It was a big deal in the town many years back. Everything was full of police. Not the rural kind we were used to, but city cops, the ones in plain clothes. They were looking for something, for someone, house to house, a woman who wasn't from there, who nobody recognized when they showed the photo. Among them were 3 who seemed friendly, but at times were more aggressive than the others. At first, the town folks thought they were the bosses. Later, they'd learn the truth. Those 3, the most desperate to find her, weren't police. They were priests. The girl they were looking for had either escaped or been helped to escape, they said to the capital. They said she was a possessed woman who had been locked up in a convent for months, while doctors, priests, bishops, and cardinals visited her, waiting for authorization from the Vatican to perform an exorcism. But when they finally got it, when they got the green light for the ritual, someone let her out. Someone opened the door to her room and all the others she needed to leave the convent. How did they know she was in the town? I don't know. Not much was known about that, just that they searched for her for days and then disappeared. But no one in the town told them there was one more house to search. One that wasn't precisely in the town, but up there in the mountains, in the middle of a field, the house of the twins, the Berlang brothers. It's not known if someone asked them to hide her or if she showed up there asking for help, but nobody remembered them. People who went up for firewood or to hunt would come back saying they heard screams coming from inside. Screams of a man, of a woman, someone cursing very aggressively. They also said the brothers had come down to the town one afternoon to buy milk and eggs and cleaning supplies. The shopkeeper thought that was weird because they had their own animals up there, chickens, a couple of goats. It was odd they'd come down for that stuff. Sometimes they came down to sell an animal or to trade. A few weeks passed and the voices, the screams, stopped being heard. But the brothers also stopped being seen working their land. There was fruit ready to be harvested that was left to rot. The chickens disappeared. One of the goats came down to the town, hungry and thirsty. When people went up, they say they found a horrible sight. They say the woman was up there. The brothers were gone. As soon as the police were called, the others showed up again, the ones not from the town. The priests went up too, at night, and by dawn they were gone. They'd taken everything away. And me, I always thought that was folklore, legends, a poetic explanation for the death of 2 old men who just died of old age. But in that moment, in there, I couldn't stop imagining it was all true, that right where I was standing, they had kept a possessed woman hidden, but it couldn't be. It was bad enough that some crazy old hags were following me through the woods without me having the terrible luck of ending up in there. I heard laughter in the distance, outside, from where I'd come, in the trees. In some way, I understood in that moment why they were laughing. I understood where I had gone. For a second, I had the realization, if I really wasn't alone, if the stories were true, if my grandmother was right, what was in there with me was worse than what was outside. There were 2 rooms inside, one big and one small, which I guess was the bedroom. The door was closed, but if I listened very carefully over the storm, I could hear that there was someone in there. It's abandoned, but it's not empty. Grandma Rose's words echoed in my head. Where had I ended up? What had I gotten myself into? I opened the door with some effort. A solid wood door, very heavy, like an exterior door, but here on the inside, barely hanging on rusted hinges. No one, nothing, just a strange, unpleasant smell coming from there. There was a candle on the floor. I could no longer recognize the saint on it. It seemed carved away, like someone had tried to erase it. Luckily, I had a lighter. I still smoked back then, and I lit it. My cigarettes had gotten wet in the fall, but I salvaged one. It tasted like heaven. A while passed when I heard something. It sounded like something scratching the wall. I tried to pay attention, located it. It seemed to come from the wall behind me, and then it moved. I understood that something was scratching the wall outside, that something was scratching its way around the house. I heard it clearly when it passed the window, when it scratched glass and not adobe, but I saw nothing. I could only keep listening to it. My stomach hurt from the sheer terror. I felt it tightening inside me as if it were filling up, as if I had to get my guts out, as if I had to pull them out, but I had nothing to do it with. There was nothing. A few things were left around, rusted kitchen utensils. I'd have to find something. I started moving them. My gut was filling, tightening inside. I had to get it out. It was desperate. I searched without caring how dirty everything was, what I might find. And finally, I found a small, closed pocket knife. That would be enough to open up my belly and the gut that was bothering me. I took off my shirt, felt all over my stomach, and found it. It was up high, just before the ribs started. That's where I felt the pressure worst. If I could get that gut out, surely I'd feel relief. I had nothing to clean the knife with, but I hoped I could make a clean cut, just enough to let me get my fingers inside the flesh and pull. I placed the closed knife right on the spot and made a slash. As soon as I felt the first stab of pain, I managed to regret it. To wake up, what the hell was I doing? How the hell had I thought of hurting myself like that? Why was I thinking of it as normal? What was happening to me? What was in this house? I heard someone laughing inside the empty room. I headed for the door, but out there in the field, at the entrance to the trees, on the trail where I'd arrived, there was something out there. I don't know if it was the same one, but I saw a woman in black holding her shawl in the same way so the storm wouldn't take it. With her other hand, she was telling me to come, to approach. What the hell was I supposed to do? What would you have done? The door to the room creaked as if it moved, but I turned and saw it. Still just barely ajar, I thought. I looked back outside. The woman walked toward the trees, disappearing from my view. And then, from the overgrown weeds of the planting field surrounding the house, 2 more figures in black emerged. They went running after the woman. And yes, they were waiting for me. And if it was a trap, and they were waiting for me to come out, luckily, I hadn't dared to do it. I sat in the doorway with my hand on the door. I would stay inside, but if something came out of that room, if the candle went out and left me in darkness, I would run. I'd take my chances with whatever was out there in the woods. I leaned back. I was so tired. I opened my eyes. Without realizing it, I had stood up. I heard something coming from the little room, like eating sounds. The door remained slightly open and I approached. I could see something in there. The candlelight filtered in and showed me that horrifying scene. There was a woman. She wore a necklace of what looked like bones and dried roots. She was sitting on a mass of flesh and blood on what seemed to have once been two corpses. She had blood coming from her mouth, her eyes rolled back, both arms extended to her sides, one down, one up, like a figure I remembered seeing drawn somewhere, like a demonic figure. She wasn't looking at me, but it wasn't necessary. With those white eyes facing the wall, she was piercing my soul. I could feel her. I turned to run out. Nothing mattered anymore. But in the doorway, I was sitting, asleep. It was as if in that moment, as if in that instant, I realized I had left my body. I opened my eyes. I was sitting there in the doorway of the little house, and I heard the sounds in the room. The door to the room was slightly ajar, and I didn't dare look inside. Whatever I had just seen, however I had seen it, was enough. I left the house, started walking through that field of overgrown weeds, when I heard something moving through them, and then a voice. "Run!" I listened. I listened to that voice that sounded so much like my Uncle Leo's, but I didn't think about it. I ran. I ran because it must have been close to 4 in the morning, but I could see just enough to find the trail back down, or dawn was coming early. Oh God, somehow I was given the strength, the ability to see where I was running. I soon found the dead campfire, without the figures around it, but I knew I was going the right way. I got home a little before dawn. It wasn't raining anymore, but my grandmother was praying, looking exhausted. She hadn't slept a wink, waiting for me to return. She told me she couldn't lose me too, and she made me swear I would never go up into the mountains alone again. I told her yes. I promised, and I cried for everything, for her, for the fear, for what I had just seen, because I was tired and everything hurt, my soul hurt, and because I hadn't been able to bring Uncle Leo back, and I fell asleep. I slept deeply and woke up around 2 inches the afternoon. When my grandmother went to the market, I went to find 2 acquaintances I still had in the town. I asked them to come with me up to the Berlang house. I had to see it. I had to go back, see if my uncle was there. As we climbed, they told me everything they knew about that place, that house. It was said they found something horrible up there when the police went up looking for the woman, but nobody knew for sure what it had been, what they saw. Only that it nearly drove the poor souls who witnessed it insane. We went up and the house was empty. I went in. There were no signs of anything, just my burned down candle. I really had been there that night. I don't know why, but they asked us to leave just a few minutes after we'd arrived, and obviously I listened. I didn't plan on spending another moment there. As we were leaving, one of my friends noticed something. At first he thought it was a person among the branches, and we got scared. But then we saw it clearly, a scarecrow that had been left behind as the weeds had grown up around it. They had overgrown it to the point of almost hiding it. It was wearing a green sweater. I thought of Uncle Leo, but that sweater was too worn, dirty, torn, covered in earth, as if it had been there for a long time, for years. Nothing more was ever heard about my Uncle Leo. He never came back from that episode. My Grandma Rose died soon after from the illness that made us go care for her. Obviously, I haven't been back since then. It must be even more abandoned now, more lonely. I have nothing waiting for me there, except maybe, in some way, that house that still speaks to me. But from far away, I feel I can silence that voice. I can ignore it. I am at peace, although I keep seeing something there, waiting for someone to take it away with them, to take it out, to free it. If that ever happens, I only hope that thing there has forgotten about me, or that it never manages to catch up.